The gunshot that rang out across the prairie that scorching August afternoon in 1882 wasn't meant for Lucas Armstrong, but the bullet grazed his shoulder just the same as he rode hard toward the small homestead outside Valentine, Nebraska. He had been tracking a pair of cattle rustlers for 3 days, and now as he pressed his hand against the bleeding wound, he realized he needed help fast before infection set in under this merciless sun. The homestead appeared modest but well-kept, with a small garden struggling against the heat and a barn that had seen better days. Lucas dismounted carefully, his vision swimming slightly as he approached the front door. He knocked once, twice, and when no answer came, he tried the handle. The door swung open to reveal a scene that made him forget his own injury entirely. 2 young women lay on narrow beds in the main room, their faces flushed with fever, their breathing shallow and labored. The older one, perhaps 22 or 23, had dark auburn hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. The younger, maybe 19, was blonde and equally ill, her lips cracked and dry. A bucket of water sat between the beds, a cloth draped over its edge, suggesting someone had been tending to them before abandoning the task. Lucas forgot about his own wound as he moved quickly to the women. He touched the back of his hand to the older one's forehead and recoiled at the burning heat radiating from her skin. The fever was dangerously high. He checked the younger sister and found the same scorching temperature. Neither woman stirred at his touch, too far gone into their fevered sleep to notice his presence. "Can you hear me?" he asked gently, but received no response. His cowboy instincts, honed from years of caring for sick cattle and injured horses, kicked in immediately. He had seen fever like this before, usually from contaminated water or spoiled food in the brutal heat of summer. If left untreated, both women would likely die within a day or 2. Lucas looked around the homestead and found it stocked with basic supplies but little in the way of medicine. He spotted a root cellar door and descended to find it marginally cooler, with some preserved vegetables and dried herbs. His grandmother had taught him about healing plants when he was just a boy, knowledge that had saved his life more than once on the trail. He gathered what he could find and returned to the main room. First things first, he needed to break these fevers. Lucas drew fresh water from the well outside, noting it smelled clean and pure, so the contamination must have come from elsewhere. He soaked several cloths in the cool water and placed them on both women's foreheads, necks, and wrists. Then he checked his own shoulder, relieved to find the bullet had only grazed him. He cleaned it quickly with whiskey he found in a cabinet and bound it with a strip of clean cloth. The older sister stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. "Who are you?" she whispered hoarsely. "Name is Lucas Armstrong, madam. I am a ranch hand from the Double J spread about 30 miles west. I got injured and came looking for help, but seems you need it more than I do right now." "Olivia," she managed to say before another wave of fever claimed her, pulling her back under. Lucas worked through the night, replacing the cool cloths every few minutes as they warmed against the sister's burning skin. He found some willow bark among the dried herbs and made a bitter tea, managing to get both women to swallow small amounts when they surfaced briefly from their fever dreams. The willow bark would help reduce the fever and ease their pain. Around midnight, the younger sister began to convulse, her body racked with chills despite the heat still radiating from her. Lucas acted quickly, piling blankets on her until the shaking subsided, then removing them again as the fever spiked higher. It was a delicate balance, one he had learned watching his grandmother treat sick neighbors back in Texas. "Please do not die," he murmured as he worked. "Either of you." As dawn broke across the Nebraska plains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lucas realized he had not slept at all. His shoulder throbbed where the bullet had grazed him, but he ignored it. These women needed him, and he would not abandon them now. He searched the homestead more thoroughly as morning light filled the room and found a family Bible with names written inside. Olivia Sanders, born 1860, and her younger sister Ophelia Sanders, born 1863. Their parents, Joseph and Margaret Sanders, had died 2 years prior according to dates written in a shaky hand. The sisters were alone out here, managing this homestead by themselves. Lucas felt a surge of admiration mixed with concern. The frontier was hard enough for a family. For 2 young women on their own, it must be nearly impossible. Olivia stirred again around mid-morning, her eyes finally focusing on Lucas as he leaned over to check her temperature. "You are still here," she said, her voice rough but clearer than before. "Yes, madam. Your fever broke about an hour ago. Still elevated, but better." "Ophelia?" Olivia tried to sit up, but Lucas gently pressed her back down. "Your sister is still fighting it. Her fever has not broken yet, but I am doing everything I can." Tears welled in Olivia's green eyes. "We ate something. I think it was the preserved pork. Tasted off, but we were so hungry and did not want to waste food." "That was 3 days ago." "Food poisoning," Lucas confirmed. "I have seen it before. Your body is trying to purge the toxins. Have either of you been able to keep anything down?" Olivia shook her head weakly. "We have been too sick to even try for the past day. I tried to care for Ophelia, but then I could not get out of bed myself. You rest now. I will watch over both of you." "Why?" Olivia asked, studying his face with those striking green eyes. "You do not know us. You are injured yourself. Why would you stay?" Lucas met her gaze steadily. "Because it is the right thing to do. Because I cannot leave 2 sick women alone to possibly die. And because—" He paused, surprising himself with what he was about to say. "I am not leaving until you are both better. That is a promise." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that transcended words. Olivia nodded slowly, then let her eyes drift closed again, finally allowing herself to truly rest knowing someone was watching over them. Lucas spent the rest of the day nursing both sisters, gradually introducing small amounts of broth he made from vegetables in the root cellar. Ophelia's fever finally broke around sunset, and she woke confused and disoriented. Lucas explained everything patiently while helping her sip water. "Your voice is kind," Ophelia said softly, her blue eyes studying him. "Thank you for helping us, Mr. Armstrong." "Just Lucas, please. And you do not need to thank me." "But we do," Olivia said from her bed, her voice stronger now. "You saved our lives." Over the next 3 days, Lucas tended to the sisters as they slowly recovered. He discovered that Olivia was fiercely independent and had been running the homestead since their parents died of influenza. She had learned to shoot, to work the small herd of cattle they owned, to plant and harvest. Ophelia was gentler, preferring to work with the chickens and maintain the house, but she had her own quiet strength. Lucas found himself drawn to Olivia in ways he had not expected. She was beautiful, certainly, with her dark auburn hair and green eyes, but it was more than that. She had a determination, a fire in her spirit that matched the wild country around them. When she argued with him about getting out of bed too soon, insisting she needed to check on their cattle, he found himself both exasperated and charmed. "You need to rest at least 1 more day," Lucas said firmly on the 4th morning, blocking her path to the door. "And who are you to tell me what I need?" Olivia shot back, hands on her hips despite the fact that she swayed slightly on her feet. "I am the man who has been emptying your chamber pot for 3 days, so I reckon that gives me some authority on your health," Lucas replied, then immediately regretted his bluntness. But Olivia laughed, a real genuine laugh that lit up her whole face. "Fair enough, cowboy. 1 more day." Ophelia watched this exchange with knowing eyes from her own bed, where she was recovering more slowly than her older sister. "Olivia, you know he is right. Besides, Lucas already checked on the cattle this morning before you woke. They are all fine. You did. Olivia turned to Lucas with surprise. Of course. Someone had to. You have a decent little herd out there, about 15 head. They needed water and I moved them to a better grazing spot. You did not have to do that. I know. But I did anyway. Something shifted in Olivia's expression, a softening around her eyes. She had been alone, responsible for everything, for so long that accepting help did not come easily. But here was this cowboy, this stranger who had stumbled into their lives by chance, who asked for nothing and gave everything. That evening, as Olivia sat up in bed eating her first real meal in days, she asked Lucas about himself. He told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to ride and rope before he could properly read. His parents had died when he was young, and he had been raised by his grandmother until she passed when he was 17. After that, he had drifted north, working various ranches, never staying anywhere too long. Why not? Olivia asked. Why keep moving? Lucas was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at the darkening prairie. I guess I never found a reason to stay anywhere. Until maybe now. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Ophelia, who had been dozing, opened one eye and smiled before closing it again, pretending to sleep. By the 6th day, both sisters were well enough to move around the homestead, though Lucas insisted they take things slowly. He had been there almost a week now, and he knew he should probably move on soon. The men who had shot him were long gone, and his shoulder was healing nicely thanks to Olivia's careful rebandaging each day, her fingers gentle on his skin in a way that made his heart race. But he found excuses to stay. The fence needed mending. The barn roof had a leak. The well cover was loose. Each day brought a new project, a new reason to remain just one more night. Olivia watched him work from the porch one afternoon, bringing him water when the sun was at its highest. You know you do not owe us anything more, she said quietly. You have done so much already. Lucas took the water gratefully, their fingers brushing as he accepted the cup. What if I am not staying out of obligation? Then why are you staying? He looked at her directly, his blue eyes serious. I think you know why, Olivia. She did know. She had felt it too, this connection that had formed between them during those fevered days and nights. It terrified her because she had worked so hard to not need anyone, to be strong enough on her own. But Lucas made her want things she had pushed aside, made her remember she was not just a homesteader and a caretaker but a young woman with dreams and desires. I am scared, she admitted, the words barely above a whisper. So am I, Lucas replied. But maybe that means it is real. They stood there on the porch as the Nebraska wind blew hot and dry around them, both of them on the precipice of something that could change everything. That night, Ophelia insisted on cooking dinner, claiming she needed to feel useful. She made a simple stew from vegetables and salt pork, and the three of them sat around the small table like a family. The conversation flowed easily, filled with stories and laughter. Ophelia told Lucas about their childhood in Ohio, how their father had dreamed of the West and finally brought them out here when Olivia was 16. He wanted to build something, Olivia said softly, a legacy. Then the influenza came through and took both our parents within a week of each other. We almost gave up and went back east, but we decided to stay and fight for what they had started. You have done them proud, Lucas said sincerely. This homestead is thriving despite everything against you. Not everything, Ophelia interjected with a sly smile. Some things have worked out in our favor recently. Olivia shot her sister a look, but Ophelia just grinned innocently. After dinner, Lucas stepped outside to check on the horses while the sisters cleaned up. Ophelia immediately turned to Olivia with barely contained excitement. He is in love with you. Ophelia, do not be ridiculous. I am not being ridiculous. I have eyes. The way he looks at you, the way he stayed even though he could have left days ago. And you feel the same way. Do not even try to deny it. Olivia was quiet for a long moment, her hands stilling in the wash water. What if he leaves? What if I let myself care and he just drifts on like he has his whole life? What if he stays? Ophelia countered. What if you push him away and spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been? You have been so strong for so long, sister. Maybe it is time to let someone be strong with you, not just for you. Those words echoed in Olivia's mind as she lay in bed that night, listening to Lucas settle into his bedroll on the floor. He had insisted on sleeping inside to be close in case either sister needed help during the night, though they were both well recovered now. It had become a habit, his presence in their home, and Olivia realized with a start that she could not imagine the homestead without him in it. "Lucas?" she whispered into the darkness. "Yes. Are you really not leaving?" There was a long pause, and Olivia held her breath. Finally, Lucas spoke, his voice low and earnest. "I meant what I said that first day. I am not leaving until you are better. And Olivia, I do not think I could leave even if I wanted to. Not now. Not after everything." "What are you saying?" She heard him shift, and then he was kneeling beside her bed, his face barely visible in the moonlight streaming through the window. "I am saying that I have been drifting my whole life, never belonging anywhere, never finding a place that felt like home. But these past days here with you and Ophelia, this feels right. You feel right. I know it is fast and maybe I am crazy, but I have fallen for you, Olivia Sanders. I have fallen hard, and I do not want to get back up." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She reached out and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. "I am terrified," she whispered. "Then we will be terrified together." She leaned forward and kissed him, a soft, gentle press of lips that held all the emotion they had been holding back. Lucas responded carefully, his hand coming up to cup her face with infinite tenderness. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "Stay," Olivia said simply. "Not just until I am better. Stay." "Yes," Lucas replied without hesitation. "Yes, I will stay." From her bed across the room, Ophelia smiled in the darkness, her heart full knowing her sister had found something precious and rare. The next morning brought new energy to the homestead. Lucas worked alongside Olivia as she showed him every detail of their operation, from the cattle grazing patterns to the irrigation system her father had designed for the garden. He contributed his own knowledge, suggesting improvements and offering to help implement them. They worked side by side in the hot sun, and there was a new ease between them now that their feelings were acknowledged. Ophelia watched them with satisfaction while she tended the chickens and worked in the garden. She had been worried about Olivia, about the weight of responsibility that rested solely on her older sister's shoulders. But Lucas had changed that dynamic. He did not try to take over or diminish Olivia's authority. Instead, he worked alongside her as an equal partner, respecting her knowledge while offering his own. 3 weeks after Lucas had first stumbled onto their homestead, a rider appeared on the horizon. Lucas tensed, his hand instinctively moving toward the gun he now wore since the rustlers were still potentially in the area. But as the rider drew closer, Lucas relaxed and even smiled. "That is Jim Hawkins, the foreman from the Double J," he told Olivia. "He must have been looking for me." Jim Hawkins was a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He dismounted and shook Lucas's hand firmly. "Been worried about you, son. You have been gone near a month now. Thought those rustlers might have done you in. They winged me, but I survived. Found help here." Lucas gestured to the homestead and the 2 women standing on the porch. Jim's eyes took in the scene, and understanding dawned on his face. "I see. The kind of help that makes a man forget to come back to the ranch. Lucas had the grace to look sheepish. I can explain. No need. I have been around long enough to recognize that look on a man's face. Jim tipped his hat to Olivia and Ophelia. Madam, miss, seems you have been taking good care of our boy here. He saved our lives, Olivia said, stepping forward. We owe him everything. And now he owes you his heart, by the looks of it, Jim said with a knowing smile. He turned back to Lucas. The boss is willing to give you your job back if you want it, but I suspect you might have other plans now. Lucas looked at Olivia, then back at Jim. I do. I want to stay here, help build this homestead into something even greater. But I would appreciate any advice you could offer, and maybe we could work out an arrangement where I still do some work for the Double J when they need extra hands during roundup or drives. Jim considered this, then nodded. That could work. You are a good hand, Lucas, and we would be happy to have you when we need you. In the meantime, you got my blessing to build your life here. He paused, then added quietly, your grandmother would be proud of you. She always said you would know home when you found it. Those words hit Lucas hard, bringing unexpected moisture to his eyes. Jim stayed for lunch, charmed by Ophelia's cooking and impressed by the operation the sisters had maintained. Before he left, he told Lucas about the rustlers. We caught them 2 weeks ago. They are in jail in town waiting for the circuit judge. You will need to give testimony when he comes through next month, but you do not have to worry about them anymore. After Jim left, the homestead settled back into its routine, but with a new addition. Lucas was no longer a temporary guest. He was part of the family now, part of the land itself. He threw himself into improving the homestead with Olivia's guidance and partnership. They expanded the cattle herd by purchasing 3 more breeding cows at a fair price from a neighbor who was moving back east. They repaired the irrigation system and planted a late summer crop of vegetables that thrived in the rich soil. Through it all, Lucas and Olivia's relationship deepened. They worked together during the day and sat on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing while Ophelia played her mother's old piano inside. Sometimes they would walk out to check on the cattle as the sun set, and Lucas would take Olivia's hand in his, both of them marveling at how natural it felt. One night in early September, as the first hint of fall coolness touched the air, Lucas asked Olivia to walk with him after dinner. Ophelia practically pushed them out the door, grinning widely. They walked to the top of a small rise that overlooked the homestead, watching as lamplight glowed warm in the windows below. I have been thinking, Lucas began, then paused, suddenly nervous in a way he had not been even when facing down rustlers. That is dangerous, Olivia teased, but her eyes were serious, hopeful. Olivia Sanders, I know we have not known each other long by most standards. Just a few months. But I also know that I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are the strongest, most beautiful, most infuriating woman I have ever met, and I want to spend the rest of my life standing beside you. I want to build this homestead with you, raise a family with you, grow old watching the sun set over this land with you. He dropped to one knee and pulled out a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she nodded. Yes, she managed to say. Yes, Lucas Armstrong, I will marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that was deeper and more passionate than any they had shared before. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and laughing. Ophelia is going to be insufferable about this, Olivia said, wiping tears from her cheeks. She has been predicting it since the first week. She is a smart woman, your sister. They walked back to the homestead hand in hand, and sure enough, Ophelia took one look at them and let out a squeal of delight. I knew it! I knew it! When is the wedding? We have not gotten that far yet, Lucas said with a laugh. I just asked her 5 minutes ago. Well, do not wait too long. Life is too short and uncertain out here to waste time. Her words were wise beyond her years, born from the experience of losing their parents so suddenly. Olivia and Lucas agreed that they would marry quickly, within the month if they could arrange it. There was no need for a long engagement when they were both so certain. The weeks that followed were a flurry of activity. Word spread through the small community around Valentine about the wedding, and neighbors they barely knew offered help and congratulations. The widow Johnson, who lived 10 miles south, helped Ophelia alter their mother's wedding dress to fit Olivia. The blacksmith in town, a jovial man named Rutherford, offered to host the reception in his large barn. The minister, Reverend Thomas, agreed to perform the ceremony on a Sunday afternoon in late September. Lucas used his savings to buy lumber and supplies, and with help from Jim Hawkins and some of the other hands from the Double J, they built an addition onto the homestead. 2 new rooms, one that would serve as a proper bedroom for Lucas and Olivia, and another that could be a nursery someday. Ophelia would keep the main room to herself. The night before the wedding, Olivia and Ophelia stayed up late talking like they used to when they were girls. "Are you happy?" Ophelia asked seriously. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Olivia replied. "When Mother and Father died, I thought that was it for me. I thought my life would just be work and survival, nothing more. But then Lucas came, and everything changed. He makes me want to dream again, to hope for more than just getting through each day. He is a good man, and he loves you so much it practically radiates off him." Ophelia paused, then added quietly, "I am glad you will not be alone anymore. I worried about you, about what would happen if something happened to me too." "Do not talk like that. I am just being realistic. But now you will have Lucas and eventually children, and this homestead will be filled with life and love again like it was when Mother and Father were alive. That makes me happy." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with a crisp autumn breeze that carried the scent of dried grass and distant rain. Olivia dressed in her mother's altered gown, a simple but elegant dress of white linen with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Ophelia wove wildflowers into her sister's hair and stepped back to admire her handiwork. "You look beautiful," she said, tears in her eyes. "Mother would be so proud." At the small church in Valentine, Lucas waited nervously, dressed in a new suit that Jim Hawkins had helped him purchase. When Olivia walked down the aisle on Ophelia's arm, since they had no father to give her away, Lucas's breath caught in his throat. She was radiant, glowing with happiness, and he felt like the luckiest man alive. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Reverend Thomas spoke about love and partnership, about building a life together through good times and bad. When it came time for the vows, Lucas's voice was strong and clear as he promised to love and cherish Olivia for the rest of his days. Olivia's voice shook slightly with emotion, but her words were just as firm as she made the same promises to him. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thomas said with a warm smile. "Lucas, you may kiss your bride." And he did, to the cheers and applause of the assembled community. When they pulled apart, both were grinning widely, their eyes shining with joy and unshed tears. The reception at the blacksmith's barn was lively and fun. There was music and dancing, food and drink, laughter and celebration. Lucas danced with Olivia, holding her close as they swayed to a fiddle tune, both of them marveling at how much their lives had changed in just a few short months. "Do you remember that first day?" Olivia asked quietly. "When you stumbled into our homestead more dead than alive? I remember thinking I had never seen anyone more beautiful, even sick with fever," Lucas replied. "And I remember making a promise that I would not leave until you were better. You kept that promise and so much more. I always will. Every promise I make to you, Olivia, I will keep." As the sun set and the party continued around them, Lucas and Olivia slipped away, riding back to their homestead under a sky full of stars. Ophelia had insisted on staying in town for the night with the widow Johnson, giving the newlyweds privacy. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a discovery of each other that felt both exciting and natural. Lucas was gentle with Olivia, mindful that this was new territory for both of them. They took their time, learning what brought pleasure, what made the other gasp and sigh. When they finally came together fully, it felt like the culmination of everything that had been building between them since that first day. Afterward, they lay tangled together in their new bed, Olivia's head resting on Lucas's chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I love you," she whispered. "I do not think I have said that enough today." "You have said it exactly the right amount," Lucas replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "But I will never tire of hearing it." "I love you too, Olivia Armstrong." She smiled at her new name, testing it out in her mind. Olivia Armstrong felt right, like it had always been meant to be. The months that followed were some of the happiest either of them had known. Lucas settled fully into life on the homestead, and his presence made everything easier. Tasks that had been overwhelming for two women alone became manageable with three people working together. The cattle herd grew, and they even purchased a breeding bull that would ensure their herd continued to expand. Winter came to Nebraska with cold winds and occasional snow, but the homestead was snug and warm. They spent long evenings around the fire, Lucas reading aloud from books while Olivia mended clothes and Ophelia worked on her embroidery. Sometimes Jim Hawkins or other neighbors would stop by, and they would share meals and stories, building the kind of community that made frontier life bearable. In January, Olivia began to feel sick in the mornings. At first, she thought it was something she ate, but when it continued for a week, Ophelia gave her a knowing look. "You are pregnant," Ophelia said matter-of-factly one morning after Lucas had gone out to tend the cattle. Olivia had suspected the same thing but had been afraid to say it aloud. "How can you tell?" "Mother was the same way when she was carrying me. She could not keep anything down before noon, but by afternoon she was ravenous. You are doing the exact same thing." That evening, Olivia told Lucas, nervous about his reaction. But he swept her up into his arms with a whoop of joy, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "We are going to have a baby," he said in wonder, setting her down gently and placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby, Olivia. You are happy?" "Happy? I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once." He kissed her softly. "Thank you for this gift." The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite the morning sickness. As spring arrived and the prairie bloomed with wildflowers, Olivia's belly began to swell with new life. Lucas was attentive and protective, sometimes overly so, which led to arguments when Olivia insisted she could still do her share of the work. "I am pregnant, not dying," she would say in exasperation when he tried to stop her from lifting anything heavier than a cup of water. "I know, but I worry," Lucas would reply. "I cannot help it." Ophelia would laugh at their bickering, pointing out that it came from a place of love. She had taken on more responsibilities around the homestead, freeing up Olivia to rest more as the pregnancy advanced. She also began spending time in town more frequently, and Olivia suspected her sister had caught the eye of the banker's son, a young man named Peter who seemed to find reasons to be wherever Ophelia was. In late August, almost exactly a year after Lucas had first arrived at their homestead, Olivia went into labor. Lucas paced outside while the widow Johnson and Ophelia attended to Olivia inside. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Lucas wore a path in the dirt from his pacing, refusing to eat or rest until he knew Olivia was safe. Finally, as the sun climbed high in the sky, a baby's cry rang out. The widow Johnson emerged with a broad smile. "You have a son, Mr. Armstrong. a healthy, strong boy, and your wife is tired but doing well." Lucas rushed inside to find Olivia propped up in bed, her hair damp with sweat but her face radiant as she held a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with exhausted joy. "Meet your son," she said softly. Lucas approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the small red face of his child. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with unfocused eyes, one tiny fist waving in the air. Lucas felt something crack open in his chest, a surge of love so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. "He is perfect?" Lucas whispered, sitting on the edge of the bed and wrapping his arms carefully around both Olivia and the baby. "You are both perfect. What should we name him?" Olivia asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Lucas knew exactly what felt right. "Joseph," he said, "after your father. Joseph Lucas Armstrong." Tears streamed down Olivia's face. "He would have been so proud." Ophelia leaned in to get a better look at her nephew, her own eyes misty. "Hello, little Joseph. Welcome to the family." The baby's first weeks were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Lucas took over most of the homestead work, insisting that Olivia rest and focus on recovering and feeding the baby. He would come in from the fields to find her nursing Joseph, and he would stop to watch them, still marveling that this was his life now. He had a wife he loved more than breathing, a son, a home, and a purpose. Everything he had been searching for his whole life had been here waiting for him. As Joseph grew from a newborn into an infant, his personality began to emerge. He was a happy baby, quick to smile and laugh, with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. He loved being outside, and Lucas would often carry him around the homestead, showing him the cattle and horses, talking to him about the land even though the baby could not possibly understand. "You are going to be a fine rancher someday," Lucas would tell his son. "You will learn to ride and rope, to care for the land and the animals. But more than that, you will learn to be a good man, to treat people with respect and kindness. That is what really matters." When Joseph was 6 months old, Ophelia announced that Peter, the banker's son, had asked her to marry him and she had accepted. The wedding was planned for the following spring, and Olivia was thrilled for her sister, even though it meant Ophelia would be moving to a house in town. "You will still visit all the time, though," Olivia insisted, holding Joseph on her hip as they discussed the news. "Of course. You will never be rid of me," Ophelia promised with a laugh. "Besides, I want to be around to watch this little one grow up. And who knows, maybe he will have cousins to play with before too long." The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and hard work, of growth and occasional setbacks, but always forward progress. Ophelia married Peter in a lovely spring ceremony, and they settled into a comfortable house in Valentine. She visited the homestead often, and true to her prediction, she had her first child, a daughter named Margaret after their mother, within a year of marrying. Lucas and Olivia had 2 more children over the next several years. A daughter they named Lucy, born in 1885 when Joseph was 3, and another son they named Samuel, born in 1887. The homestead that had once been a struggling operation run by 2 orphan sisters was now a thriving ranch run by a family. Lucas had proved to be not just a good husband and father, but also a brilliant rancher. He had a gift for breeding cattle, and the Armstrong herd became known throughout the region for its quality. They expanded their land holdings by purchasing an adjacent property when the owners decided to move west to California. What had started as a small homestead was now a substantial ranch, employing several hands during busy seasons. But Lucas never forgot where he came from or the promise he had made. Every year on the anniversary of the day he first arrived at the homestead, he and Olivia would walk to the top of the rise where he had proposed, and they would talk about how far they had come. "Do you ever regret staying?" Olivia asked him on their 10th anniversary, watching the sun set over land that stretched as far as the eye could see. Lucas pulled her close, his arm around her waist. Not for a single second. You gave me a home, Olivia. You gave me a family and a purpose. You gave me everything I was searching for, without even knowing I was looking for it. We gave each other everything, Olivia corrected, leaning into his embrace. That first day, when you said you were not leaving until I was better, I had no idea what you really meant. What did I mean? You meant forever. You meant you would stay not just until the fever broke, but for all the fevers, all the challenges, all the joys and sorrows. You meant you would be my partner in everything, for the rest of our lives. That is exactly what I meant, Lucas agreed, kissing her temple. Though I did not fully understand it myself at the time. I just knew I could not leave you. They stood together watching the prairie turn gold and orange in the dying light. The sounds of their children playing in the homestead below drifting up to them. Joseph, now 10, was teaching Lucy, 5, how to rope a fence post. Samuel, 3, toddled around trying to copy his older siblings, his laughter ringing out clear and bright. Life was not always easy. There were droughts that tested their resources, harsh winters that took a toll on the livestock, and the ever-present challenges of frontier living. But through it all, Lucas and Olivia faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. When Joseph turned 12, Lucas began teaching him the more advanced skills of ranching. The boy had a natural aptitude, much like his father, and took to the work eagerly. Lucy showed an interest in the business side of the ranch, learning to keep the books and manage accounts with a precision that impressed even the banker Peter. Samuel, the youngest, was the dreamer of the family. He loved the land like his father, but he also loved books and learning. Lucas and Olivia encouraged all their children to pursue their interests, wanting them to have the opportunities that they themselves had missed. Ophelia's family grew as well. She and Peter had 3 children total, and the cousins grew up playing together, spending summers at the ranch and winters in town. The bond between the 2 sisters remained strong despite the physical distance, and Olivia often said that she could not imagine her life without Ophelia's friendship and support. As the 19th century drew to a close, the Armstrong Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region. They had weathered the economic panics and natural disasters that had driven many of their neighbors to give up and move on. Their success was built on hard work, careful planning, and the unshakable partnership between Lucas and Olivia. On a warm evening in September of 1899, the family gathered for a celebration. Joseph, now 17, had just returned from his first successful cattle drive to Omaha, where he had negotiated an excellent price for their herd. Lucas stood to make a toast, raising his glass to his assembled family. 17 years ago this month, I rode onto this property more dead than alive, chasing rustlers and running from a bullet. I found 2 sisters sick with fever, and I made a promise that I would not leave until they were better. What I did not know then was that I would never leave at all. This land, this family, you are all the greatest gifts I could have ever received. To Olivia, my wife and partner, who made me a man I never dreamed I could be. To our children, who give us purpose and joy every single day. And to Ophelia and Peter and your family, who have been with us through everything. Thank you all for making my life more than I ever imagined it could be. There were tears and laughter as glasses clinked together, and the family celebrated long into the night. Later, when the guests had gone and the children were asleep, Lucas and Olivia sat on their porch, rocking gently in chairs Lucas had built years ago. Can you believe it has been 17 years? Olivia asked, her hand finding his in the darkness. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like a whole lifetime, Lucas replied. But every single day I thank God that those rustlers shot at me, that I was injured, that I found my way to this exact piece of land. Because it led me to you. Fate, Olivia said softly. Maybe it was always supposed to happen this way. Maybe. Or maybe we just got really lucky. Lucas brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Either way, I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every single moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the vast Nebraska sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the cattle lowed softly in response. These were the sounds of home, the music of the life they had built together from nothing but determination and love. As the years continued to pass, the Armstrong Ranch remained a cornerstone of the Valentine community. Joseph eventually took over more and more of the day-to-day operations, allowing Lucas and Olivia to step back slightly, though neither could ever fully retire from the land they loved so much. Lucy married a lawyer from Lincoln and moved to the city, but she returned often to visit, always bringing her own children to experience the ranch. Samuel became a teacher, settling in Valentine and educating the next generation of frontier children, but he helped out at the ranch during summers and weekends. Ophelia and Peter's children also thrived. Their eldest, Margaret, married a rancher from the next county, creating an alliance between two of the strongest ranching families in the region. Their social gatherings became legendary, bringing together families from miles around. In 1902, when Olivia turned 42 and Lucas was 44, they decided to build a proper ranch house to replace the original homestead structure. They kept the original building as a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, but the new house was a statement of their success. 2 stories, with a wide porch that wrapped around the entire structure. It was built from lumber and stone, and stood as a testament to what could be achieved through hard work and partnership. The night they moved into the new house, Lucas carried Olivia over the threshold, despite her protests that they were too old for such silliness. He set her down in the spacious front room and pulled her close. "Do you remember when this was all just a dream?" he asked. "When you and Ophelia were alone, struggling to make it through each day?" "I remember," Olivia said, looking around at the beautiful home they had built. "And I remember a cowboy who refused to leave, who promised to stay until I was better." "I am still keeping that promise," Lucas said with a smile. "Because you make me better every single day, Olivia. You always have." She kissed him then, a kiss that held 20 years of love and partnership, of shared struggles and triumphs, of a life built together from nothing. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. The 20th century brought changes to the frontier. Railroads expanded, towns grew into cities, and the wild openness that had characterized the West began to recede. But the Armstrong Ranch remained constant, a piece of the old frontier preserved through the dedication of the family that called it home. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1907, Lucas and Olivia renewed their vows in a ceremony attended by family and friends from across the state. Joseph stood up as his father's best man, now a confident 25-year-old rancher in his own right. Lucy and Samuel stood with their mother, all 3 children beaming with pride at their parents. Ophelia, now 44 and a grandmother herself, cried through the entire ceremony. "I told you he was in love with you from the first day," she whispered to Olivia as they prepared for the ceremony. "I told you not to let him go." "You were right," Olivia admitted with a smile. "About everything." The ceremony was held on that same rise where Lucas had proposed a quarter-century earlier. As the sun set over the prairie, casting everything in golden light, Lucas took Olivia's hands and spoke from the heart. "25 years ago, I promised to love you through sickness and health, through good times and bad. Today, I renew that promise with the knowledge of what it truly means. I have loved you through drought and plenty, through the joy of welcoming our children and the sorrow of losing friends to the harsh frontier. I have loved you through every sunrise and sunset, through every challenge we faced and every triumph we celebrated. and I will continue to love you for however many years God grants us together." Olivia's voice was thick with emotion as she replied, "You came into my life when I needed you most, when Ophelia and I were sick and alone and facing death. You stayed when you could have left. You loved me when I was afraid to love you back. You built this life with me, brick by brick, day by day. Everything good in my life stems from that first moment when you walked through our door and promised not to leave. I love you, Lucas Armstrong, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." There was not a dry eye among the assembled guests as Reverend Thomas, who had married them the first time and was now quite elderly himself, pronounced them still husband and wife. The celebration that followed was joyous and heartfelt, a true testament to the community the Armstrongs had helped build. As the years continued to pass, Lucas and Olivia became the elder statesmen of the ranching community. Young couples would come to them for advice on everything from breeding cattle to managing finances to keeping a marriage strong through hard times. They dispensed their wisdom freely, always emphasizing the importance of partnership and mutual respect. Joseph married at 28, bringing home a strong, intelligent woman named Catherine who fit perfectly into the Armstrong family. They gave Lucas and Olivia their first grandchildren, twin boys born in 1912. Watching his son become a father touched Lucas deeply, completing a cycle that had begun that day in 1882 when he had stumbled onto a small homestead and found his destiny. In 1915, as the world beyond the prairie grew increasingly troubled with news of war in Europe, the Armstrong Ranch remained a place of peace and continuity. Lucas was now 57, his dark hair mostly gray but his body still strong from years of ranch work. Olivia, at 55, was as beautiful to him as she had been the day they met. Her auburn hair now streaked with silver but her green eyes still bright with intelligence and love. One evening, they sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching Joseph work with the cattle in the distance, his own sons trailing behind him trying to copy their father's every move. Olivia leaned against Lucas's shoulder, his arm around her. "We did it," she said softly. "We built something that will last beyond us." "We did," Lucas agreed. "And it all started with a fever, a promise, and a stubborn refusal to leave. You saved my life that day." "No," Lucas corrected gently. "We saved each other. You gave me a reason to stop drifting, to put down roots and build something real. I was just as lost as you were sick, Olivia. We healed each other." She tilted her head to look up at him, seeing the love and contentment in his face. "I would do it all again too. Every single moment. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts. They made us who we are. They made this family what it is." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set once more over the Nebraska prairie, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. The sounds of the ranch surrounded them. Cattle lowing, horses nickering, the distant laughter of grandchildren playing. This was their legacy, not just the land or the buildings or the herd, but the family they had created, the community they had helped build, the love they had nurtured through more than 3 decades of marriage. It had all begun with a wounded cowboy, 2 sick sisters, and a simple promise. "I am not leaving until you are better." Lucas had kept that promise in ways neither of them could have imagined that first day. He had stayed not just until Olivia recovered from the fever, but through every challenge and joy that followed. He had stayed to build a life, to raise a family, to create something that would endure long after they were gone. As darkness fell and the stars emerged overhead, Lucas and Olivia Armstrong sat together on their porch, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a love story worthy of the wild frontier itself. Their journey from that desperate day in August 1882 to this peaceful evening in 1915 had been long and not always easy, but it had been theirs, and it had been beautiful. And in the end, that was all that mattered. They had found each other, loved each other, built a life together. The fevered sisters had been healed by the steadfast cowboy, and the drifting cowboy had found his home with the determined woman who had stolen his heart. It was a story that would be told and retold by their descendants for generations to come, a testament to the power of love, commitment, and a promise kept. As they rose to go inside for the night, Lucas took Olivia's hand one more time, just as he had thousands of times before, and together they walked into their home, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring, secure in the knowledge that they would face it together, just as they had faced everything for the past 33 years. The homestead that had once been a place of sickness and desperation was now filled with life and love, and it would remain so for generations to come, all because a cowboy had made a promise and a woman had been brave enough to accept the love he offered. Their story was one of healing and hope, of second chances and new beginnings, of finding home in the most unexpected places. And as the lights in the Armstrong ranch house glowed warm against the vast Nebraska night, it was clear that the promise made so long ago had been kept in full, and would continue to echo through the lives of everyone they touched, a legacy of love that would never fade.